Top Bed Talk.
So before I start, because there are here not only anesthesiologists, but there are surgeons, I would like to introduce our distinguished lecturer, but talk about a little bit about John Snow. Now, John Snow was an English physician, and he was an anesthesiologist. Probably he was more known for the famous cholera that happens in 1854, if I'm right, in London. And if you go to Broad Street, which is just off Oxford Street, you find there is a pump. Now, what actually happens that he did a study, was probably one of the first epidemiologists. He actually studied the cholera cases in two regions of the city. And one was receiving sewage, contaminated water, and the other receiving relatively clean water. So he was actually able to actually test the water there on the famous Broad Street pump, and that's what identified that there was a cholera. So really this was a major impact in the health population. But John Snow was also famous because as an anesthetist, he was using ether and chloroform. And in fact, he was the one who gave to Queen Victoria chloroform a la reine. And basically, she had one of the many children, obviously, I don't know how many, but definitely she had a child with the chloroform. So this is a very famous person. And Epom decided to have a lecture in his name. So I think today I'm very delighted to introduce you the known surgeon in the prehabilitation community. Dr. Slooter, Gerrit Slooter, comes from Eindhoven in the Netherlands, and he has been working for 20 years, very much in the area of endoscopic, abdominal surgery mainly, and colorectal. He has been organizing a trainer center for both advanced laparoscopic and perioperative care with some colleagues in Central America. So today he's going to talk to us about the major trials on the prehab trials about. So without any ado, welcome, Gerrit. We are delighted to have you there.
The John Snow Lecture. John Snow was in the news yesterday. Kit and Rose had her second baby, a girl this time, and they have a son already. But this is John Snow and the other John Snow, and I thought I'd make a joke about that. But when I go to Google, there's many others that have done so before and even depicted the pump. But John Snow there's some similarities with John Snow and Jon Snow, because they both knew how to use a knife. John Snow was a famous anesthesiologist, actually introducing the modern anesthesiology, and he was an epidemiologist. But before that, he was a humble surgeon and a general practitioner. So he knew how to use the knife. But he was far too intelligent just to stay a surgeon and chose another profession. Like you are far more intelligent than I am. Another intelligent person here is Franco Carli. I'm surprised I'm having this lecture here because I think every day there should be a lecture of Franco in any course about prehabilitation. He's the godfather of it all. He actually was one of the founders of EROS and then of prehabilitation. And we have a lot to thank him for. And that's why in 2018, we honored him to be the first honorary member of the International Prehabilitation Society, now merged with poets, two iPoets. And my tall friend, my former PhD candidate, Stefan van Rooyen, he is 7 feet tall. We became true friends. If there's another person that I have to thank a lot for, it is Stefan van Rooyen. He really put in a great effort in improving our perioperative care in our hospital. And one of the brilliant things we did as doctors is we sent him to Franco. And if Stefan hadn't gone to Franco to meet him and talk to him about perioperative care and prehabilitation, probably someone else would have been standing here, because actually I'm all representing here is the major work of Franco and Stefan, maybe partially of what I contributed to this all. These are disclosures. Actually, there's two foundations, the Stichting Against Cancer in Holland and the Dutch Cancer Society, that gave grants to do research. This is what we here are standing here for, preventing complications. The patients on the left are the patients that die, and the patients on the right don't. The patients on the left are the people that carry the burden of having complications, and the people on the right don't. If you lay in bed with a complication, you will lose over 3 pounds of muscle tissue every 5 days. And it will take you about 4 months to rebuild 3 pounds of muscle tissue. So you're there getting sicker than you were before. You have fluids in the wrong compartment. If you see a CT scan of one of these patients, the lungs are always filled at the dorsal part of the body because they're laying on their backs. So these are the patients that have the complications, that might have an anastomotic leakage and a complication afterwards. And these are the patients you take home as a surgeon. On the other hand, the other patient, that's what we all try to and have them recover fast, is we try to do our best to avoid complications. We use ERAs, we do prehabilitate, and we do all other kind of actions to keep this patient out of bed. Patients nowadays only step into their surgical bed 15 minutes before surgery. And even after surgery, we try to get them out of bed as soon as possible and to have them walk around and do normal things. If they want coffee, go get your own coffee, wear your own clothes the day after surgery. And that changed a lot to our belief of patients, and it changed a lot to our nursing staff. Instead of treating sick patients week by week, they are actually helping fairly fit people, normal people, to go home as early as possible. And I'll just take you a little on the journey we did, the why, how, and what of our perioperative care in our hospital. Because in 2015, we thought that our results of colorectal surgery were about average. We were quite ahead in endoscopic surgery, so we thought our results should be better. And then we did a why, how, and what, and Stefan took the part of that. The why is because we had too many complications. Maybe average, but average wasn't good enough. And the how is to dive into literature, to look at your own material, to look at your own patient data and find things that you can improve. So the first thing Stefan did is he dug into literature, and we were mostly interested in anastomotic leakage. And we tried to find in literature factors that might contribute to developing anastomotic leakage. And these are all factors that have to do with our lifestyle. So that's obesity, high blood pressure, diabetes, high cholesterol, and psychosocial factors and smoking. And then there's another important factor, that's anemia. We discussed this before. And anemia has two reasons. It has to do with your lifestyle, but also with a disease in this case, because about half the patients that have colorectal cancers are anemic. And we counted these factors, and you see here a graph of our own patients, then a retrospective cohort, and we just counted the factors that were involved with these patients, all modifiable factors. And we found that if you have over 4 of these factors, you might have a chance of about 70% to get a serious complication. So the more of these factors you have, the more chance of a complication. So we should avoid that. And is that important? Yes, it is very important. And I happen to read a report of the World Health Organization on aging and health, some figures in there. This is statistics from 8 years ago, and you see the world's population. It's the different percentage of patients older than 60. And we see already 8 years ago a lot of people older than 60, and those are the ones that are our future patients. Those are the ones at risk of developing complications or to be at least operated upon. And if you draw this into the year of 2050, which is just over 25 years from now, about 1/3 of the world's population in our countries will be 60 years or older, giving a high demand on our healthcare system. I believe in Holland now 1 out of 4 people is working in care, meaning if the population of the world will get older, we will definitely need more people working in care. And then that's why we should work on prevention, primary prevention, secondary prevention, and tertiary prevention, which is prehabilitation. I just wanted to depict them next to each other. You see, even in Africa, when 8 years ago there were barely people 60 years or older, in Africa you even see patients older than 60. This is something else in the World Health Report. This is us. This is our life cycle, actually. We all try to remain as healthy as possible, staying at 100% for as long as we can. And then things change and we eventually die, but we try to stay as healthy as possible for as long as we can. And there's a difference, because the line is not going at 100% all the time. Because I'm 57 years old, and my knee, I have bow legs, so my knees start to hurt. And I was discussing with Allard and David, our young PhD candidates, we were discussing cycling. And I'm glad if I make 60K on a cycle, and I like to race, but they're discussing tours of at least 120K to go cycling. That's different in age, so you decrease a little, but you try to stay as healthy as possible. And there's influences enough that try to bring us in a different condition. But if we completely recover from whatever happens to us, some disease, surgery, maybe an accident, we can still continue our pathway, our optimal course of life. But what happens if our recovery is incomplete? Then we carry the burden of the complications of everything we encounter. So there's a lot to fight for. In this report, there's also a chapter about healthy aging. Discussing functional ability, intrinsic capacity, and environment. And I picked up that the functional ability is our mental and physical tools to reach whatever we want to reach. And these goals might be different for various people, but those are the tools we have to do what we like to do. But it's also our resilience. We have these things available to oppose whatever overcomes to us. And then you have your intrinsic capacity. That's the soil you have. That's your unknown power, your mental and physical potential that you have to grow. And that's what we might use in getting patients in a better shape before operations. And then you have environmental factors. And these environmental factors have to do with the microclimate around you, your condition, the place where you live, but also with your social factors. There's people or seniors that have friends and they like to go and play cards. So you sit and you play cards. But there's also people of the same age that find a group that take them out cycling twice a week. So they might be fitter because their environment is fitter. So that's the extrinsic world that will motivate you to use your soul and improve your functional ability. And it deteriorates over age. This is from the same report. This is our hand grip strength. This is our resilience. And over time, your strength reduces. This is stats from all different countries. And fortunately, I found that the Dutch have a better hand grip strength than the Russians. Age is important, however. This is a study from our colleagues in Delft. They used the Dutch Cancer Registry. They registered complications after colorectal cancer surgery. And on the left, you see the surgical complications, and on the right, you see the non-surgical complications. And the red line is the people older than 80, then the next 5 years interval, and the next 5 years interval. And you see on the right that, that at least patients with an older age have a higher chance of having a complication. You also see the difference. There is a reduction in complications in the non-surgical aspect, but barely at the surgical aspect. So this is a cohort of over 38,000 people from the Dutch registry. And here you see the patients with either one complication, surgical, non-surgical, and the surgical and the non-surgical. And if you add those up, the line would be higher. But there are definitely patients that do have surgical and non-surgical complications. And you see that the non-surgical complications are reduced from 21 to 17%, and with the surgical complications, there's barely any effect over time. They say that there are some changes over time that made the reduction of the non-surgical complication. The introduction of minimally invasive surgery, of course, ERAS, geriatric screening and involvement of geriatricians, nutritional screening, prehabilitation, and then also to mention hemoglobin. And because we mentioned this this morning about hemoglobin, I put in the results of the LECCHECK study that we performed together with 17 other hospitals and together with the University in Amsterdam, to find factors during the operation at the instant of making an anastomosis. We just registered the condition of the patient then, and we tried to find modifiable factors that would influence outcome. So there were over 1,800 patients involved with an anastomotic leakage of 8.4% and mortality of 1.3%, which is average in literature. And on the left, you see non-modifiable factors. We cannot change age, we cannot change the distance of the tumor from the anus, but there are influenceable factors. And the most striking factor here is hemoglobin. If patients have an hemoglobin below 6.5, and maybe for you 10.4 grams per deciliter, the odds of getting an anastomotic leakage is 5.2, meaning this is a quick win in whatever you do. So we supplement iron, and if this graph shows you, this is stepwise every half step of a figure of hemoglobin, that only at normal hemoglobin your chances are really reduced of having anastomotic leakage. But if you have to give iron to these patients, the patients that need it, those are who are anemic, but also the patients that have a transferrin saturation less than 20%, which is a major determinant of being iron deficient, you better give intravenous iron instead of oral iron, because you will deliver more in the bloodstream and it's more effective over time. And this graph shows the increase of hemoglobin level before and after surgery. These are the people that we are dealing with. The one is active, and you see more active elderly than they usually are. Some are more ambitious, some have more resilience, and some have a completely different structure. But they are all a result of their lifespan. Everything they did during their life, their bad habits, their social factors. And also, we lead a sedentary life. That's no wonder for you all, but I found this about Dutch people. On average, we spend over 9 hours in a chair. When you're young, you just go to school and study. But when you're older, you might still work with a computer. But most of the time we spend behind a TV, potentially with a bag of potato chips or whatever. But we sit too much. That's what's hampering us. And now I'm going to show a slide that no one will believe, but everyone shows and everyone knows that this is the basic of why we do prehabilitation, is that fitter patients get a better outcome. That's what was the start point of the prehabilitation program, together with a consortium, with Franco, with a group from Barcelona and from Copenhagen. We put together a program for prehabilitation. Those were the experts in the field those days, and I'm so proud that they joined the project. In colorectal cancer, we discussed this morning, you have about a 5-week interval between diagnosis and surgery, so which is the window of opportunity to improve our patient's condition. This is what we tried in a pilot. So we made a program for prehabilitation, and we did a pilot in our hospital with non-randomized patients. And if you wanted to participate in the prehabilitation program, you had test before, test after prehabilitation, and then 4 weeks post-operatively. And if you did not want to participate in the prehabilitation program, we asked patients whether they were willing to have them self-tested before and after surgery. To run through this program, it is high-intensity training, 3 times per week, supervised with a physical therapist on strength and endurance, but also on the other days that you did not train, you had to do exercise for at least an hour, walk brisk, do some cycling or whatever to stay active. We wanted to prevent that people would sit on the couch after their high-intensity training and do nothing more but train for 3 times per week. Involvement of the dietitian, supplementation of protein and vitamins, cessation program for smokers. It was a special program. Usually if you have a non-smoking program, it's group sessions, and in the 3rd session people will start reducing their smoking. But now you only have 4 weeks, so that they made a program that people start instantaneously with nicotine replacement, however, because I believe patients on the blue eyes that they will stop, but you need this nicotine replacement to reduce the stress. And then the psychological support, teaching patients about relaxation, about their anxiety, inform them optimally, teach them about exercise, but also relaxation and sleep, So it's potentially the most important factor. What we learned from our pilot is that these patients were willing to come to the hospital. 90% of the scheduled sessions were attended by these patients. And so they came, and they were happy to be involved. Something changed in these patients. They were more involved. They were not a number. They wanted to take initiatives themselves to help with their recovery. The patients that did prehabilitate, we did a 6-minute walk test before and after, and we saw in almost any patient that they improved in their 6-minute walk test. And there's a few patients that did not improve, but we did other testing, like all the tests that we had this morning, and patients improved at least in 3 of those domains. So we think that, we believe that the program would at least improve the patient's condition. Then if we look at the results, we put the baseline 6-minute walk test at 100%. The patients that did have the program improved their condition, and there was still a lot left 4 weeks after surgery. The patients that did not get the program, we had 2 measurements at baseline and after surgery, and you see quite a difference in outcome. But this is not a randomized setting. This is on availability of the program or the patient's wish. But it does mean a lot to a patient if you have a better outcome after surgery. These are the patients without a program that had a recovery above baseline. So in the control group, 40% of the patients had a measurement higher than baseline. But in the prehab group, this was 68% in our pilot study. And 68 means you recover faster. And even if you need additional chemotherapy, you might be, more ready to receive chemotherapy or complete the cycle of chemotherapy. So there's definitely an advantage. What have we learned from our pilot is that these patients were willing to come. The patients got fitter. We changed the time of the protein drink before night, because just before patients wanted to go to bed, they had to drink, and they were all nausea during the night. So we put this 2 hours in front. And in our pilot, all patients went to the psychologist. And then when we evaluated, the psychologist told us that in the majority of the cases, she couldn't do anything with the patient because these patients just had regular fears. We published the protocol, and it's a good thing we published the protocol because a lot of people picked this up and made this the protocol of their own research. So most research in Holland and abroad are done according to the same protocol, and that helps if you want to compare outcome. So you're not comparing apples and oranges, but you're comparing quite a similar program. So we were going to do the international prehab trial based on our pilot study. And you see the 4 pillars. You see the 4 pillars here. And I took out anemia. I told you why anemia is so important. And we also wanted to give our control group the effects of patient blood management. So they were left out. These are the centers that participated, and I mentioned them before. What did we do? We included patients from 27 to 21, but we had 3 intervals of COVID that we had to stop the study completely. We had a randomized study, but we stratified for the center, but also for colon or rectal cancer, and patients that had chemoradiation in rectal cancer, because these patients have a trajectory of about 20 weeks before surgery, and we did provide a prehabilitation program 4 weeks before surgery, but we stratified for that. Our population were adult patients. Well, there's not that many below 18 that have bowel cancer, but there were elective surgeries for colorectal cancer, where there should be no sign of metastases, and there's some logical exclusion criteria not to participate. Complications within 30 days were registered, and especially severe complications, because those are the ones that give most burden. We did a 6-minute walk test and compared baseline to postoperatively 4 and 8 weeks. Also secondary outcomes that we are still investigating, but the main outcome is that we actually aimed for including 700 patients, some 700 patients. And as you see, we only included 1 over 250, so we reached over 1/3 of inclusion. But last year when we were here, we heard some other randomized trials, and every randomized trial has problems with including patients. That's just because you have to ask patients whether they are willing to participate, and some say no, some don't qualify. And then there's this other thing in a randomized trial is that you need to have a protocol that is similar in all hospitals. And in not every country there's a similar condition. We have physical therapists in Holland at every corner of the street, but they're not available in every country as much as we want. And in prehabilitation, about 8 to 10 disciplines are involved, and you have to get them all in line. So inclusion goes slowly, and then when you have a third cycle of COVID and there's a complete shutdown, and we can barely imagine that from just over a year ago that all our healthcare systems were down the drain, we had to decide to quit inclusion or figure out our data. These are the main outcomes. If you look on the left, you see the CCI, the complication index. And what you see is prehab has 0 and control has 0, but this is a mean. And you there see the problem with making a registration of complications and adding all these complications, because only 40 or 30 or 40% of the patients will have a complication. So you have so many zeros that statistics are hard to do. But what you see, we had a reduction of complications. But unfortunately, we cannot find this statistically significant because the p-value is just over 0.05. And the bars depict the complications. And the first set of bars is for all patients with a complication. The second bar is for severe complication, medical complications, surgical complications, and both medical and surgical complications. And you see definitely a reduction in all complications, 25%, severe complications, 40%, medical complications, 40%, surgical complications, and both medical and surgical complications. But unfortunately, significance was not reached because the p-value was 0.07 in this case. This is what we see in the 6-minute walking test at baseline, preoperatively, 4 weeks after surgery and 8 weeks after surgery. And what surprised me was this point here. Even people that did not prehabilitate, they improved their 6-minute walking test. But I think there's a problem with the 6-minute walking test, because if you ask me to do a 6-minute walking test, I'll just start at some pace. And after 6 minutes, I will see what I did or how much energy I have left in the end. So there must be a learning effect, because if I've done a 6-minute walking test once, I know that I could maybe increase my pace at the beginning, so I'll get a better outcome. So there might be a learning effect of the 6-minute walking test. But the outcomes postoperatively, they're an addition of a better condition and less complications, I think. The same counts for all the other things we measure. You see the VO2, the anaerobic threshold. You see an improvement before surgery because of the prehabilitation program, and then the effect of surgery. And you see that for the chest press, and we could do that for all other power measurements we did. And you see a major difference between the group that prehabilitated and the group that did not. And the same is for hand grip strength, which might be an expression of all our resilience. Secondary outcomes, we did not find a difference in length of stay, in readmissions. However, there was less use of intensive care. There were no serious adverse events, and there were 7 adverse events, might be nausea or sometimes people that had to stop their exercise because they needed to take a breath or felt uncomfortable. So from the prehab trial, we conclude that we had a reduction of severe complications. We had a reduction of medical complications, statistically significant. We had a reduction of overall complication and even surgical complications, but it was not significant. But patients had a better recovery, and we truly believe that prehabilitation is safe for patients. A weakness, however, is that we had to do a premature stop, and it's underpowered. But a strength of the study is that we included all patients and not only the high-risk patients. I think that is a major question. Should we do a prehabilitation program for high-risk patients, or should we do a prehabilitation program for all patients? Because most literature, well, the group of Barcelona is there. They did a prehabilitation randomized trial in high-risk patients, all major surgeries. and they found a 50% reduction of complications. One of my colleagues from the group Groningen in the north of our country, they did in colorectal cancer randomized trial on high-risk patients, and they found a 40% reduction of complications. So it looks like at least the high-risk patients have an easier effect. This is a cohort from our own hospital that David sorted out. We compared the pre-prehabilitation data with the post-prehabilitation data, so the effect of prehabilitation. And this is the VO2 anaerobic threshold, and you see the line of the critical level of 11. And there were 32 patients at risk before the prehabilitation program and only 15 after the program. This is for the VO2 max, 65 below 18, and after prehabilitation only 33 that were potentially at high risk. But the whole curve shifts, and that's actually what I think that happens, is that the whole curve in fitness shifts. Even the patients that are fit at the beginning, they will get fitter. And as a surgeon, you unfortunately cannot predict which patient will get a complication. There might be this young lady that is only 45 years old and fit. She might get an anastomotic leakage, while this 80-year-old high-risk patient might not get a complication. So what we do, we improve the condition of a whole cohort. We improve the condition of 200 patients and hope they will have less complications as a whole group. So I truly believe that we can improve all patients. And in our data, we try to find whether even the fit patients would improve. So this is the steep ramp test, cycling up to more power and more power and more power. And we found, we divided the group in quartiles, that the patients that performed low or high on their baseline had actually the same improvement. They all demonstrated a wattage improvement of about 30. If you make a delta, so you do the difference at baseline and you make it a relative difference, then of course the increase that patients make that were good at the beginning is smaller than the ones that underperformed at the beginning. And if you correct this for kilos, so you don't put all patients in one group, you see the same effect. And if you do it relatively, you see that there is more to gain in the patients that performed less at the beginning. But all patients improved. You see this for all our muscle tests. This is the relative improvement. All patients improve, but relatively, the patients that perform poorer at the beginning, they might have a better effect. And the same counts for the 6-minute walking test, their difference. So we will not close the debate on prehabilitating high-risk patients or all patients, but in my hospital, we prehabilitate all patients. And actually, when the randomized trial was done, we were able to offer a prehabilitation program to all patients. So there's no discussion. All patients don't know anything better than that they are going to be involved in the prehabilitation program, because the endoscopist, the case manager, the nurse, the surgeon, everyone tells the patients about the benefit, the potential benefits of improving their condition. So prehab is standard of care now, and there's no randomization anymore, and over 90% of the patients decide to join the program, and they complete the program. And we created a network for physical therapists educated in providing prehabilitation around the hospital, so they can go to 8 or 10 practices around the hospital. So prehabilitation can be provided around the corner. And Charissa over there, she collected the data of the patients that were prehabilitated, small numbers in the beginning since 2017. The patients from the international trial are excluded. And then since the beginning of 2022, all patients were provided the program, so the number of inclusions is higher in the later years. But we were able to compare almost 200 patients to almost 400 patients in the same period that did not get the prehabilitation program. And their age was about just over 70. And most important is the percentage of the specific procedures was quite similar, so the colon, sigmoid, and rectal surgery. We found an increase in steep ramp test and all the other power tests that we did, but we expected that. In our patient group, which has all the drawbacks of a non-randomized trial, of a cohort study with a historical control, but we found definitely that overall complications were reduced. We found a reduction of the CCI. We found that the severe complications were reduced. We didn't find a difference in readmission or ICU admission. However, not statistically, but there was definitely a difference. And what happens if you stay in a hospital shorter? You will, and you have less complications, you will use less radiology. You will get a discount on your laboratory. Microbiology barely used. 15% less use of paramedics, and a 40% saving in blood products. And if you add this up, you come to a total savings in these patients with products that they use after surgery of about 315 euros. So if you add this list, and all these topics are written as a relative reduction and a final price per patient, are calculated and added. We can do these exercises in Holland because our insurance companies want to know about every penny we spent. So we have to do a registration of all these weird things, but at least we can do some calculation. Taken in mind that these are the internal prices of all these products. So we don't tell our insurance companies what a radiology costs, but these are internal prices. So definitely different in other hospitals and definitely different in other countries. But if you add the reduction of hospital stay, if you add the reduction of use of intensive care and the post-operative activities, we gain over 1,100 euros, at least in our cohort. And then the cost of the prehabilitation program. I want to run through this, but you need physical therapists to provide prehabilitation. That was at the beginning of the program when we were reimbursed by the insurance companies. And this is with regular care, and some things changed on the way. You need the physical therapist, you need the dietitian, you need your proteins. We have an external program in Holland for smoking cessation. We don't have to pay for that. We use a case manager for mental support, and we thought that we had to refer about 10% of the patients to a psychologist, but it turns out to be only 2%. We have thought of a CPAT indication of about 40%. It turned out to be 10%. The administrative staff, once it was a regular care, they took less time. And we don't need a project manager anymore because it's completely introduced. So the final price we calculate now with is 635 euros. And if you put a cost benefit, you think you might have one. But then there is all these arguments that the benefit cannot be calculated because there's flexible cost in a hospital. If you reduce a hospital bed, does not mean that you actually save a hospital bed. And Gerrit says, well, you can put another patient in that bed so you can make more money. But we have a ceiling construction for budgeting in the hospital, so we cannot get any more income. We can reduce cost, but the department where the savings might be made cannot calculate the savings because that bed will still have a nurse, and you can only collect the money if you can fire a whole unit of nurses. That's the way we can save money in a hospital. So there's flexible cost of not having to put on the light or to change the sheets, but the bed is still there, so there's also fixed cost. So you can actually only reduce about 60% of the cost. Then the insurance companies say, well, if you make profit from prehabilitation, we should not pay for it. So there's a problem there. And then there's another tough problem. We have this network of providers of prehabilitation in the first line, and a hospital finds it hard to pay people outside of the hospital. So the problem is definitely not solved. But the Federation of Medical Specialists in Holland has done some calculation, a budget impact analysis. If we would prehabilitate all patients in Holland, we would generate a savings of 46 million euros in 5 years, which is, if we include all patients in a prehabilitation program, and this graph depicts the percentage of penetration of prehabilitation and the potential of the program. But why doesn't it happen then overall? Are we here in this audience looking through rose-colored glasses? You call it probably. We call it the pink glasses in Holland. We are believers, convincing believers that we should believe, but there's others to be convinced. And why don't others solve our problem financially? Because we see the benefit for the patient. And this is our great problem. Actually, the prehabilitation was invented and the early adapters were there in 2016. And we knew that if you could get patients in a better condition, they would go have a faster recovery, a shorter length of stay, a better quality of life, early return to work, early return to normal activities. What are the costs? Paramedics and supplements. What are the potential benefits? Savings at the surgical ward, but not the same ward as making the cost. And post-hospital savings, social business case is even more positive. But there is definitely a positive business case. And I am a senior surgeon. I was there in 1999 when laparoscopic colorectal surgery was introduced. We created less damage to patients, leading to faster recovery, shorter length of stay, better quality of life, return to work, return to normal activities. We had cost, instruments, OR time, but there were potential savings at the surgical ward, post-hospital, there were savings in the social business case, but it was definitely a positive business case. But we were forced to wait until the evidence was there before we could broadly implement it. But what actually happened is that we already started doing prehabilitation before the evidence was there. But it took 15 years because before the evidence was there that laparoscopic surgery was better than open surgery. And the same seems to happen to prehabilitation. How hard should the evidence be? But then there's this other innovation in 2010. This is a robot. And we know several things about the robot. The robot is not better than laparoscopy. There is no faster recovery, no shorter length of stay, no better quality of life, no early return to work. Return to normal activities is equal. There's cost, there's a tremendous cost. There's 3 million just to buy the apparatus, and every operation is 2,000 euros more expensive. And it takes way more operating time. There are potential benefits. No, there are not. Zero, no, nothing. The business case is extremely negative, and it appeared that the financial hurdle was completely no obstruction. And every self-respecting hospital, about 5 years ago, had a robot in his operating room. So we are willing to make investments that are completely useless, while we have low-hanging fruit that we can collect. So I hope you take this message to your financial advisors and the board. Talking about evidence, we were running the Cochrane transcript this year and were able to publish it. But the evidence for the benefits of prehabilitation was low. We now did the largest international study on prehabilitation, a randomized trial demonstrating the effect of prehabilitation, but one randomized trial will not make a management change, will not make prehabilitation be part of guidelines. It might be still a recommendation. And I'm sure in the coming years, I've heard about activities in the UK, heard about activities in Australia, and I'm sure that there will be a lot of more studies that will add to the evidence, but I think we all should not wait until the evidence is completely clear. And Malcolm asked, what is the ideal study to prove it? And I think whatever the outcome might be, I still think it will not solve the financial issues. I started with the why, how, and what of our hospital. I think at least we did something well. I told you about the leak check, and the red diamond is our hospital. Not only did we include most patients, but we had a fairly low number of anastomotical leakages. So we did something well. And this is the use of our yearly cohort of 200 patients of intensive care. Post-operatively, but we don't send patients to the intensive care unit post-operatively, but those are the patients with complications. And you see we needed over 200 beds in the beginning, and last year there's no use of 6.7 beds a day, so let's say there were 7 days of intensive care use of a cohort of 200 patients. So definitely things have changed. Now, what will happen in the Netherlands? We have 2 organizations drawing really on prehabilitation. That's the Dutch Surgical Society. We have a work group of front runners in prehabilitation that put their shoulders on implementation of prehabilitation. And it's not an original name, but we have the Society Fit for Surgery, which is multidisciplinary. And together with these organizations, we try to involve as many hospitals as possible. And one thing we did, we made a uniform protocol. So we used the protocol from our international consortium and presented this to all various disciplines, and the physical therapists, the dietitians, the anesthesists, the internal medicine, all could put in their share. So we now have a uniform protocol for Holland. And the insurance companies believe that we all should use this protocol if we want reimbursement from the insurance companies that will reimburse us. Meaning we can all help in collecting the data. We have a protocol for anemia control, which is spread all over the country. And in our prehabilitation in Holland, we do not do a patient selection yet. What we do with these two organizations, we help other hospitals. We teach them multidisciplinary. Actually, it's Charissa, which takes the major part in it. It used to be a task of our hospital, but we transferred this to the Society Fit for Surgery. Already 15 out of the 75 hospitals in Holland are now using our protocol and helping to collect the data. This is just data on fitness, because all other data on outcome is in the national registry. And we have a research agenda, so whenever there is a grant provider which has a question about prehabilitation, they ask us to make sure that someone else is not trying to invent what already was invented in other hospitals. Together with society, we try to convince stakeholders, even government, to have it on the political agenda to introduce prehabilitation, even though the evidence is not hard enough. And we try to deal with financial aspects with all stakeholders. So that is the case for Holland. I hope to have had a plea for prehabilitation and that you all might have picked up some of the things we did before. I hope in the end we will all go to the bar. Thank you.
Thanks for downloading Top Med Talk. Don't forget to subscribe, check us out on YouTube, and of course on social media. We're on Instagram, Facebook and X. Also, it's important to remember that Top Med Talk is the broadcasting arm of EBPOM, Evidence-Based Perioperative Medicine. We'd love you to find out more about that, and the way to do that is ebpom.org. Check out our website and find out about some of the incredible conferences we're going to be arranging across the year. ebpom.org.